Hey guys, tonight we begin not with ancient Athens or fairy kingdoms, but with something far more intoxicating. The smoky jazz clubs of 1950s New York City, because, believe it or not, Shakespeare understood that love has always been chaos, whether you lost in an enchanted forest or wandering the village at 3 in the morning, chasing someone who doesn't want you while running from someone who does. From basement speakeasies to after-hours magic, from doo-wop groups chasing their big break to young lovers defying every rule their parents made. Night's story proves that the heart wants what it wants, no matter what decade you're living in. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these nighttime journeys we take together. And let me know in the comments where you retuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's drifting off to sleep around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe let some soft jazz play in the background, and let us slip into the summer of 1957 together, where the music never stops and love never makes sense. The summer of 1957 hung heavy over Manhattan like a saxophone's last note, thick with humidity and possibility, in the heart of Greenwich Village, where the streets twisted like improvised melodies and the night belonged to those who understood that music was the only truth that mattered. There stood a club called the Athens. Its neon sign flickered blue and gold against the brick facade, casting restless shadows on the sidewalk where a line of sharply dressed patrons waited beneath the awning, their cigarette smoke rising into the warm June darkness. Inside, the air swirled with bourbon and perfume, with the ghost of 1,000 riffs played on these very boards. The stage sat elevated at the far end of the room, draped in burgundy velvet curtains, the spotlight waiting like a held breath. Round tables crowded the floor, each one circled by chrome-backed chairs, where men in slim suits and women in cocktail dresses leaned close to be heard over the house band's warm-up. The bar stretched along the left wall, all polished mahogany and bottles that glinted like jewels, tended by bartenders who moved with the efficient grace of dancers. Theodore Athens owned the Athens Club, and everybody who mattered in the jazz world knew it. He was a man in his middle 40s with silver threading through his dark hair, always dressed in perfectly tailored suits that whispered of money made and kept. His father had been Greek, his mother from Harlem, and he built this empire with both their gifts, his father's head for business, and his mother's ear for music that could make the angels weep. Tonight, he stood near the bar with a rocks glass of whiskey in his hand, his sharp eyes surveying his domain with the satisfaction of a man who'd built something that mattered. In 4 days, Theodore Athens would marry Hippolyta James, the finest female vocalist to ever grace a microphone in this city or any other. She'd been headlining at a club in Chicago, a rival establishment called the Amazon, where she'd built a reputation that made strong men go weak when she wrapped her voice around a ballad. Theodore had pursued her with the single-minded determination he brought to everything, and now she was his, not just his headliner, but his bride-to-be. The wedding would be the event of the season, and tonight's performance was part of the celebration. A long engagement finally reaching its crescendo. The club's assistant manager, a nervous young man named Theseus, pushed through the crowd with the jerky movements of someone carrying bad news. He was thin, with wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his nose, wearing a brown suit that looked borrowed from an older brother. He approached Theodore with the caution of a man approaching a sleeping lion. "Mr. Athens, sir, I need to speak with you. It's about my daughter, Hermia." Theodore turned, his expression patient but distracted. "Make it quick, Theseus. We've got a full house tonight, and Hippolyta goes on in 20 minutes. Theseus twisted his hands together, his voice rising with agitation. "It's serious, sir. My daughter, she's a pianist, as you know. A good one. I've been training her since she was 6 years old. I've arranged for her to marry Demetrius Stone. He's that tenor saxophonist who plays with the Dizzy Gillespie band sometimes. Good musician, solid career, steady income. But Hermia, she's refusing. She says she's in love with someone else. Theodore's eyes narrowed with interest now. The problem pulling him from his pre-show satisfaction in this world. Marriage arrangements between musical families were common. They built dynasties, merged talents, created opportunities. A good match could mean the difference between a career that fizzled and one that blazed. Who's the other man? Theodore asked. Lysander Grant. He's a trumpet player, freelance, works the clubs downtown, plays bebop, nothing steady. He's got talent, I'll give him that, but no stability, no connections. He's been sneaking around with Hermia for months, filling her head with romantic nonsense about following their hearts and playing music for the love of it, rather than the money. Aegeus practically spat the words, his face reddening. I told her she's under contract with me until she's 21. Told her she married Demetrius like we agreed, or she never play professionally in this city again. I've got connections, Mr. Athens. I can make sure of it. Theodore set his glass down on the bar, the ice cubes settling with a soft clink. This was the kind of problem that came with running not just a club, but a community. People looked to him for wisdom, for judgment. Where are they now? Your daughter and this Lysander? Here, they're both here tonight. I saw them come in separately, but I know they planned it. And Demetrius is here too, looking for Hermia. And Helena, you know Helena best, the vocalist who sometimes sits in on Monday nights. She's here as well, following Demetrius around like a lost puppy. She used to date him, and she's still carrying a torch, though he won't give her the time of day now that he's fixated on Hermia. Theodore rubbed his temple, feeling the beginning of a headache. So let me understand this clearly. Your daughter Hermia loves Lysander. You want her to marry Demetrius. Demetrius wants Hermia, and Helena wants Demetrius. That's right, sir. And I'm asking you, as the most respected man in this business, to set this straight. Tell Hermia she has to honor her father's wishes. Tell her that's how things work in this world. Theodore looked out over the crowd, seeing the young people Aegeus had mentioned scattered among the tables. There was Hermia, a petite young woman with dark hair pinned up in the style of the day, wearing a red dress that made her look like a flame. She sat at a corner table with Lysander, a lean young man with intense eyes and a trumpet case at his feet. Their heads were close together, her hand in his. At another table sat Demetrius Stone, broader in the shoulders, conventionally handsome in a way that suggested he'd never struggled for anything, his saxophone case propped against his chair as he scanned the room with growing agitation. And there, standing near the coat check, was Helena Bestall and willowy with blonde hair and sad eyes, watching Demetrius with an expression of such naked longing it was almost painful to witness. Theodore studied the tableau before him for young people caught in a tangle of desire and desperation that was as old as music itself. He'd seen it 100 times before, and it never ended well when fathers tried to orchestrate their children's hearts like they were arranging a chart for a big band. Bring them over, Theodore said, finally. All of them. Let's settle this now, before the show starts. Aegeus nodded eagerly and scurried off into the crowd. Within minutes, the 4 young musicians stood before Theodore Athens like supplicants before a judge. The house band continued their warm-up, a lazy blues progression that provided an oddly appropriate soundtrack to the domestic drama unfolding at the bar. Hermia stood defiant, her chin raised, still holding Lysander's hand. Lysander looked nervous, but determined. his free hand gripping the strap of his trumpet case. Demetrius positioned himself with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him what he wanted. His eyes fixed on Hermia with possessive intensity, and Helena hung back slightly, her tall frame somehow making her look more vulnerable, her gaze never leaving Demetrius's profile. Hermia, Theodore began, his voice carrying the weight of authority tempered with something almost paternal. Your father says you're refusing to honor an arrangement. In 4 days, you're supposed to marry Demetrius Stone. He's a good musician with solid prospects. Your father has your best interests at heart. Hermia's voice came out strong, clearer than her small frame suggested possible. Mr. Athens, with all due respect, Demetrius might be everything my father says, but I don't love him. I love Lysander. We love each other, and I won't marry a man I don't love just because it makes good business sense. Love, Aegeus scoffed. Love doesn't pay the rent. Love doesn't get you on the radio. Love is the only reason to play music, Hermia interrupted, her eyes flashing. Love is the only reason to do anything. If I'm going to spend my life making music with someone, sharing the stage with someone, it has to be someone I love, not someone I was assigned to, like a session musician reading charts. Lysander spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. Mr. Athens, I know I don't have Demetrius's connections. I'm not sitting in with Dizzy or playing the Apollo. But I'm a good musician, and I love Hermia. I'll work every club in this city, every after-hours joint, every basement speakeasy if that's what it takes. I'll give her a good life. Demetrius finally spoke, his baritone voice smooth as aged whiskey. This is ridiculous. Hermia, you know we'd be perfect together. Our families have been planning this for years. We could play the best venues in the country. I've got an audition with Miles Davis's group next month. You could be part of that world. I don't want your world, Demetrius, Hermia said coldly. I never did. Helena's voice came soft and wounded from behind them. Demetrius, you told me the same things once. You said we'd play together forever. You said I was the only vocalist who understood your phrasing. Demetrius didn't even turn round. That was different, Helena. That was before. Before what? Before you decided you wanted something you couldn't have. Theodore raised his hand, silencing them all. The music from the stage had shifted to something more discordant, as if the band sensed the tension and reflected it back. Here's what I can tell you, he said. In this city, in this business, reputation is everything. Hermia, if you defy your father publicly, it will follow you. Clubs won't book you. Musicians won't work with you. That's the reality. Then I'll leave the city, Hermia said immediately. Lysander and I will go somewhere else. Aegeus's face went purple. You ungrateful enough, Theodore said sharply. He looked at Hermia with something like admiration mixed with pity. You've got 4 days until this arrangement is supposed to be finalized. 4 days until my wedding, which is when your father planned to announce your engagement officially. Use that time to think carefully about what you're throwing away. I don't need 4 days, Hermia began. But Lysander squeezed her hand, silencing her. Thank you, Mr. Athens, Lysander said. We appreciate your wisdom. Theodore waved them away, suddenly tired of the whole mess. As the young people dispersed back into the crowd, Aegeus, lingering to sputter ineffectual protests, Hippolyta, James, emerged from the back hallway. She moved like music made flesh, her dark skin gleaming against a silver gown that caught the light with every step. Her hair was swept up elegantly, and her presence commanded attention without demanding it. Trouble in paradise? She asked Theodore, sliding up beside him at the bar. Young love, Theodore said, or young stupidity. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Hippolyta smiled, a knowing expression that suggested she'd seen it all, and then some. You were young once, Theo. Don't you remember what it felt like to want something so badly you de-risk everything for it? I remember it made me do foolish things that brought you here, to this moment. To me, she kissed his cheek, leaving a trace of lipstick. Now, I believe I have a show to do, as Hippolyta made her way to the stage, the crowd erupting in anticipation. Theodore Athens watched the young lovers at their separate tables and wondered what kind of chaos the next 4 days would bring. The night deepened as Hippolyta's set reached its crescendo, her voice wrapping around autumn leaves with such aching beauty that even the bartenders stopped to listen. But in the back corner booth, Hermia and Lysander barely heard it. They leaned across the table, their whispered conversation urgent and conspiratorial. "We leave tonight," Lysander said, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "After the club closes, I've got an aunt who lives upstate, runs a small club in the Catskills. She'll take us in, let us play there until we figure things out. Once we're outside the city, outside your father's reach, we can start fresh." Hermia nodded, her eyes bright with fear and excitement. "I'll need to go home first. Pack a bag. Meet me at Penn Station at 3 in the morning. The milk train leaves at 3:30. 3 o'clock, Penn Station. I'll be there with my horn and everything I own." Lysander reached across and cupped her face. "No regrets, only that we didn't do this sooner." They didn't notice Helena at the neighboring table, her tall frame hunched over a gin and tonic, her ears catching every word. When Hermia excused herself to powder her nose, Helena saw her opportunity and slid into the vacated seat across from Lysander. "You're making a mistake," Helena said, without preamble. Lysander jerked back, startled. "Helena, this isn't your business." "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to love someone who doesn't love you back. I know what it's like to watch someone chase a dream that is going to break them." Her voice cracked slightly. "If you two run off together, Demetrius will follow. He's obsessed with Hermia. He won't let this go. Let him follow. It won't change anything." Helena's fingers tightened around her glass. "Where are you going? Maybe if I knew, I could help somehow." Lysander hesitated, then sighed. The woman looked so desperate, so broken. Penn Station, 3 in the morning. "But Helena, I won't tell anyone," Helena lied, already standing. "I promise." She left the table and made her way through the crowd to where Demetrius stood brooding near the stage. She tapped his shoulder, and when he turned with irritation, she leaned close to his ear, shouting over the music. "I know where they're going. Hermia and Lysander. They're running away tonight." Demetrius's expression sharpened instantly. "Where?" "Penn Station. 3 in the morning. They're taking the milk train upstate." Even as she said it, Helena felt the words turn sour in her mouth, the betrayal of Hermia's confidence burning like cheap whiskey. "Why are you telling me this?" Demetrius asked, suspicion flickering across his face. "Because I love you, you idiot," Helena said, her voice breaking. "Because I've loved you since we were kids, playing at rent parties in Harlem. Because maybe if you see that Hermia doesn't want you, you'll remember that I do." Demetrius barely heard her. He was already calculating, planning. Penn Station, 3 o'clock. He grabbed his saxophone case and headed for the door without another word to Helena, who stood alone in the crowd, tears starting to stream down her face. Across the club, near the service entrance, a very different drama was unfolding. 6 men clustered around a battered upright piano, their faces showing various degrees of anxiety and excitement. This was the Mechanicals, a doo-wop group that had been trying to break into the big time for 3 years, with nothing to show for it but a string of failed auditions and gigs at venues so small they barely qualified as venues at all. Their leader was Peter Quince, a music teacher by day who wore bow ties and believed earnestly that harmony and hard work could overcome any obstacle. Beside him stood Nick Bottom, their lead singer, a man with an oversized personality and an even more oversized opinion of his own talent. He wore his shirt collar open and his hair slicked back with enough pomade to lubricate an engine. "Gentlemen," Quince said, clutching a sheaf of papers, "I've got incredible news. Mr. Athens is looking for an act to perform at his wedding reception in 4 days. Just a short set, maybe 20 minutes. But if we nail it, if we really shine, we could finally get our break. He could become our patron, book us regular gigs here at the Athens." Bottom immediately puffed up. "Naturally, I'll take the lead on all the songs. My voice is what they'll want to hear. That smooth, crooning style. I'll do that new number, Love Me Tender. I've been working on my Elvis moves." Francis Flute, the youngest and most nervous of the group, raised a tentative hand. "Actually, Mr. Quince, I thought maybe I could try lead vocals on one song." "I've been practicing. You've got a fine falsetto." "Flute," Botter interrupted dismissively. "Perfect for backing vocals. Leave the heavy lifting to those of us with real stage presence." Tom Snout, who played the stand-up bass, exchanged a weary look with Snug the drummer. They'd been through this routine 100 times. Bottom's ego was as reliable as a metronome, and about as welcome. Robin Starveling, the group's guitarist, lit a cigarette and squinted through the smoke. "When do we rehearse, Quince? For days isn't much time." "Tonight," Quince said firmly. "After the club closes, we'll use the stage. We'll work all night if we have to. This is our shot, boys. We can't blow it." As the mechanicals huddled over their arrangements, the night outside the Athens Club grew stranger. In the alley behind the building, where the kitchen vents pumped out heat and the smell of fried food, the real after-hours scene was beginning to stir. This was where the underground players gathered, the ones who didn't play for the mainstream crowd, who experimented with sounds so far out they'd left conventional jazz behind entirely. Beyond the respectable venues, past the clubs where tourists came to feel dangerous while remaining perfectly safe, there existed another world entirely. The after-hours scene belonged to those who understood that music wasn't entertainment, it was religion. It was magic. It was the only truth in a world built on lies. These were the basement clubs with no names, the warehouse spaces where the music did unstart until 3 in the morning, and did unstop until the sun came up angry and red over the east. River, in a converted warehouse in the meatpacking district, where the walls still held the ghost smell of butchered beef and the windows were painted black, there was a space simply called Avalon. No sign marked it. No address listed it. You had to know someone who knew someone, and even then you might not get past the door. Inside, the air hung thick with marijuana smoke and artistic ambition, with the sound of music that was still being invented, still finding its shape. The man who ran Avalon went by Oberon, though that wasn't the name on his birth certificate. Nobody knew what that name was, and nobody dared ask. He was a legend, a saxophonist who'd played with everyone who mattered in the 40s, who'd turned down a contract with a major label because they wanted him to play it safer, smoother, more commercial. Instead, he'd disappeared into the underground, becoming something between a musician and a myth. He was in his late 30s, but looked older, with deep-set eyes that had seen things beautiful and terrible, skin the color of strong coffee, and fingers that could make a saxophone speak in tongues. Tonight, Oberon sat on a threadbare velvet couch that had probably been expensive once, in some uptown apartment, before it found its way down here to the kingdom of the lost and inspired. He wasn't playing, he was watching his wife across the room, and the tension between them was thick enough to choke on. Titania had been born Tina Turner, no relation to the singer, though she had a voice that could strip paint, and she'd been Oberon's partner in every sense of the word. They'd built Avalon together, created this sanctuary for musicians who were too strange, too black, too queer, too experimental for the mainstream clubs. But lately, the partnership had soured into something bitter and competitive. The source of their current Cold War stood between them, literally. His name was Charlie, a 17-year-old piano prodigy from Harlem with fingers like quicksilver and a gift so pure it was almost frightening. He'd shown up at Avalon 6 months ago, and both Oberon and Titania had immediately seen his potential. But they disagreed fundamentally about what to do with it. Titania wanted to nurture Charlie's classical training, his technical precision, to help him become the kind of musician who could cross over, who could play Carnegie Hall. Oberon wanted to break him open, teach him to abandon structure entirely, to find the wild, chaotic heart of improvisation. They'd been fighting about Charlie ever since, and the kid had become a pawn in a game much larger than himself. "He's playing with my quartet tonight," Titania said, not looking at Oberon. She wore a purple dress that clung to her curves, and her hair was wrapped in an elaborate scarf. "We're working on some Thelonious Monk arrangements. Complex, challenging, structured." "Structure is a prison," Oberon replied, his voice like smoke. "You're going to kill what makes him special. The kid doesn't need more technique. He needs to learn how to fly. He needs discipline. He needs discipline. He needs to be free." Charlie himself sat at the piano in the corner, his hands resting on the keys, his eyes darting nervously between his two mentors. He wanted to please them both, but increasingly he felt torn in half by their competing visions. Before Titania could respond, the door opened and a figure bounded in with the manic energy of someone who had too much coffee and not enough sleep. This was Robin Goodfellow, though everyone called him Puck. He was a drummer, but not the kind who kept steady time in the back. He was chaos, incarnate, all flailing limbs and unexpected polyrhythms, the kind of player who could derail a song or elevate it to something transcendent, often in the same measure. Puck was small and wiry, with wild hair and eyes that never stopped moving. He wore a leather jacket, despite the summer heat, and his energy filled the room immediately. He was Oberon's protégé, his right hand, his occasional errand boy when the situation called for it. "Boss," Puck said, grinning. "You're not going to believe what's happening at the Athens tonight. That square joint is coming apart at the seams. Young lovers running away, fathers making threats, some doo-wop group begging for their big break. It's beautiful, pure chaos." Oberon's interest flickered. "Theodore Athens having troubles? That's unusual. He runs a tight ship, not tonight. And here's the thing, 4 of them are heading out after closing. Young couple running away, another couple chasing them. They're all going to end up wandering round the city at 3 in the morning, lost and desperate." Puck's grin widened. "Thought you might find that interesting." Titania stood, smoothing her dress. "Why would we care about Theodore Athens's problems? He represents everything we're against. Commercial, safe, playing for the tourists. Because," Oberon said slowly, an idea forming, "they'll be vulnerable, out of their element. And people who are lost sometimes find their way to places like this. To places like Avalon." He looked at Puck. "What if we helped them along? What if we made sure they ended up here?" Puck's eyes lit up. "Now, you're talking. A little mischief. A little magic. What did you have in mind? I'm thinking, Oberon said, standing now, his long frame unfolding, that these uptown musicians need to see what real music looks like, need to understand what they're really fighting for. He paused. And I'm thinking you could make sure they find their way downtown. Could point them in interesting directions. Oberon, this is foolish, Titania warned. We don't need complications from Theodore Athens's world spilling into ours. Maybe we do, Oberon countered. Maybe it's time to shake things up. The hours between midnight and dawn belonged to a different city entirely. As the Athens Club emptied out, its respectable patrons climbing into taxicabs and heading home to their apartments in Murray Hill and the Upper West Side, another population emerged from the shadows. These were the night people, the ones who lived backwards, sleeping through the day and coming alive when the rest of the world went dark. Hermia and Lysander met on the corner of Bleecker and MacDougall at 2:30, both carrying small suitcases that held everything they deemed essential. Hermia had changed into pedal pushers and a cardigan, more practical for travel. Lysander had his trumpet case slung over his shoulder and a fedora pulled low over his eyes, as if that might disguise him. Penn Station is 20 blocks north, Lysander said, taking her hand. We should walk. Cabs are too risky, your father might have them watching the stands. They set off through streets that were nearly empty, their footsteps echoing off the buildings, the summer night wrapped around them like a blanket, warm and close. Street lamps cast pools of yellow light at regular intervals, creating a rhythm of brightness and shadow. In the distance, they could hear music, always music in this neighborhood, bleeding from basement windows and propped open doors. What they didn't know was that Demetrius had arrived at the corner 10 minutes after they left, his saxophone case making him look like any other musician heading to a late gig. And 30 seconds behind him came Helena, her heels clicking on the pavement, her determination overriding her common sense. She'd told Demetrius where to find them, but she couldn't let him go alone. Couldn't let him chase Hermia without being there to pick up the pieces when he finally understood that the other girl would never want him. The four of them moved through the village like points on a strange constellation, connected but separate, unaware of how close they were to one another in the maze of streets. Near Washington Square Park, Lysander stopped suddenly. I think we're being followed, he whispered to Hermia, glancing over his shoulder. Are you sure? I don't see anyone. I keep hearing footsteps. Come on, let's cut through the park. We can lose them in there. They veered into Washington Square, where the great arch loomed white against the darkness, where the fountain sat silent, and the benches held sleeping drifters and young lovers who had nowhere else to go. The trees created pockets of deeper darkness, and the paths twisted in ways that seemed different at night than during the day. Behind them, Demetrius had indeed spotted Hermia's silhouette. He quickened his pace, his breath coming faster. Hermia, he called out. Hermia, wait. But she was already disappearing into the park with Lysander, and when Demetrius plunged in after them, he found the paths more confusing than he'd expected. The park seemed larger at night, more labyrinthine. He turned down one path, then another, his expensive shoes crunching on gravel, his saxophone case banging against his hip. Helena followed Demetrius into the park, calling his name. Demetrius, please, stop. This is insane. Go home, Helena, he shouted back without stopping. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. I love you. I don't love you. I never did. The words came out cruel, sharpened by frustration. You were a distraction, Helena. A way to pass the time. Hermia is the one I want. The words hit Helena like a physical blow, stopping her in her tracks. She stood beneath a elm tree, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. When she could finally move again, she stumbled forward, no longer sure if she was following Demetrius or simply wandering, lost in her own pain. From the shadows at the edge of the park, Puck watched all of this with delight. He'd been trailing them since they left the Athens, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who knew these streets like the back of his hand. This was even better than he'd hoped for. Confused, emotional young people, all twisted up in love and desperation, all heading in the wrong direction. He'd been carrying something in his jacket pocket all night, waiting for the right moment to use it. It was a small vial, no bigger than his thumb, filled with a liquid that looked like liquid starlight. Oberon had given it to him with specific instructions. This is distilled from peyote, mixed with something else, don't ask what. A few drops in someone's drink, and they'll see what they need to see. They'll fall in love with the first person they encounter. It's temporary, wears off in a few hours, but while it lasts, it's absolute. Puck had thought Oberon was joking, engaging in the kind of mystical talk that the underground musicians liked to affect. But Oberon's face had been serious, almost dangerous. Use it carefully, Puck. Use it to teach them something. Use it to show them that love is just chemistry and chance, nothing more. Now, watching these four wander deeper into confusion, Puck began to form a plan. It wasn't exactly what Oberon had instructed, but it would be more fun. He'd separate them, dose them, rearrange their affections like a DJ mixing tracks. The chaos would be glorious. He moved through the park like a shadow, catching up to Lysander first. The young trumpet player had become separated from Hermia in the darkness, was calling her name softly, frantically. Puck approached from behind, tapping his shoulder. Looking for someone, Puck asked. Lysander spun around, startled. Who are you? Friend, or I could be, if you need one. You look lost. I'm not lost. I'm just if-gotten turned around. My girl, Hermia. She was right here. Puck pulled out a flask. Drink this. It'll calm your nerves, help you think straight. It's just whiskey. Good stuff. Lysander, exhausted and disoriented, took the flask without thinking. He drank deeply, the liquid burning down his throat. Not whiskey at all, but something sharper, stranger, with a taste like metal and flowers. Within seconds, his vision blurred at the edges, then sharpened again, but everything looked different now. The trees seemed to pulse with their own internal light. The air itself appeared to shimmer. Go that way, Puck said, pointing down a path that led deeper into the park, away from Penn Station entirely. You'll find what you're looking for. Lysander stumbled off, following the path that seemed to glow under his feet. Puck grinned and melted back into the shadows, hunting for his next target. He found Hermia on the other side of the fountain, sitting on a bench with her suitcase beside her, catching her breath. She'd lost Lysander in the confusion of paths and was trying to decide whether to stay put or keep searching. Miss Puck said, approaching with exaggerated concern. You shouldn't be out here alone. It's dangerous. Here, have a drink. You look shaken up. Hermia eyed him warily. Who are you? Just a concerned citizen. I saw you running through the park. Boyfriend trouble. He offered the flask with a sympathetic smile. Something in his face seemed trustworthy. Or maybe Hermia was just tired enough to make poor decisions. She took a small sip, grimacing at the taste. That's awful. It's an acquired taste. Listen, if you're looking for Penn Station, you're going the wrong way. Head south, toward the village. There's a club down there, Avalon. They'll let you rest. Get your bearings. Tell them Puck sent you. Before Hermia could respond, Puck had vanished into the darkness again. leaving her sitting on the bench with the strange taste in her mouth and the world beginning to tilt sideways. She stood, swaying slightly, and headed in the direction he'd pointed, her suitcase feeling heavier with each step. Demetrius had given up calling Hermia's name and was standing in the center of the park, furious and confused. How had he lost her? The park wasn't that big. When Puck approached him, he was ready to take his frustration out on someone. "Get lost, kid," Demetrius snarled. "Tough night?" Puck asked, unfazed. "Looking for a girl who doesn't want you? That's rough." He held out the flask. "Drown your sorrows. I don't drink with strangers. Suit yourself. But that girl you're chasing, she went that way." Puck pointed northeast, toward the upper reaches of the park. "Saw her 5 minutes ago. Still had time to catch her if you hurry." Demetrius took off without another word, and Puck called after him, "Wait. At least take this, you'll need it." He jogged after Demetrius, pressing the flask into his hand. "Trust me. You catch up to her, you'll want some liquid courage." Demetrius, not slowing down, took a perfunctory swig and kept running. The liquid hit his system like a small explosion, and suddenly the night became something else entirely, colors more vivid, sounds more clear, and a strange openness in his chest, like his heart had become a radio receiver picking up signals from the universe. Finally, Puck found Helena sitting on the base of the Washington Square arch, crying into her hands. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in dark rivers, and her shoulders shook with sobs. This one, Puck thought, almost felt cruel to doze. But Oberon's instructions had been clear. All of them. "Hey there, songbird," Puck said gently, sitting beside her. "Rough night for love, huh?" Helena looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "The worst. Here." He offered the flask. "This'll help. Promise." Helena took it and drank without hesitation, not caring what it was, just wanting something to dull the pain of Demetrius's rejection. The liquid spread through her like warmth, like forgiveness, and suddenly the crying stopped. Everything felt possible again. Everything felt strange and new. "Where did they go?" she asked Puck, her voice steadier now. "South, into the village. There's a place called Avalon. Everyone ends up there eventually. You will too." Puck stood, stretching. "Just follow the music. You'll know it when you hear it." With all 4 lovers now dosed and dispersed in different directions, Puck headed back toward Avalon to report to Oberon. As he walked through the pre-dawn streets, he whistled a complicated bebop melody. Pleased with his night's work, he'd scrambled them up. Good Lysander and Hermia separated, Demetrius chasing shadows, Helena wandering alone, and all of them heading, eventually, toward the warehouse where the real magic happened. What Puck didn't know, what he couldn't have anticipated, was that he'd made one crucial error. In the darkness, rushing from target to target, he'd lost track of who was who. He thought he'd been careful, thought he'd kept them straight in his mind. But the night had confused even him, and the doses hadn't gone to quite the right people in quite the right order. Meanwhile, back at the Athens Club, the mechanicals had taken over the empty stage. Peter Quince stood in the center with his sheet music, trying to organize the chaos that was his doo-wop group. Nick Bottom paced back and forth, gesturing grandly, his voice filling the empty club. "We need to think about staging," Bottom declared. "Choreography. I've been studying the way Elvis moves, it's all in the hips. See?" He'd demonstrated a thrust that looked more obscene than sensual. "Bottom, please," Quint said wearily. "We need to focus on the harmonies first. Snug, can you keep a steadier beat on that snare? You're rushing." Snug, a large man with hands that seemed too big for the drumsticks, nodded apologetically. "Sorry, Mr. Quince. I get nervous." Francis Flute stood off to the side, practicing scales quietly, still hoping for his chance at a solo. Tom Snout plucked his bass, finding the groove, while Robin Starveling tuned his guitar for the third time. "What song are we opening with?" Snout asked. The streets between Washington Square and the meatpacking district were a journey from one world to another. The orderly grid of the village gave way to older, stranger streets that followed no pattern, that curved and dead-ended without logic. The buildings grew more industrial, more decrepit. Windows were bricked over or covered with metal grates. Loading docks gaped like open mouths in the darkness. It was into this landscape that the four lovers wandered separately, each following the sound of music that seemed to drift through the air like smoke. They didn't know they were all heading to the same destination. They didn't know that the drug in their systems was rewiring their perceptions, opening doors in their minds that were meant to stay closed. Helena arrived at Avalon first, drawn by the sound of a bass line so deep it seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. She found the unmarked door, knocked, and was admitted by a doorman who looked her up and down with amused curiosity, this uptown girl in her cocktail dress, her makeup smeared, her eyes wide and strange. Inside, the warehouse was transformed. Christmas lights were strung from the rafters, casting red and blue and gold light over everything. The stage was just a platform of rough wood, but on it, a quartet was playing music that sounded like the future, angular, dissonant, beautiful in a way that hurt. Titania stood center stage with a microphone, not singing words but vocalizing pure sound, her voice becoming another instrument weaving through the complex arrangement. Helena stood transfixed, swaying slightly, the drug making everything seem profound and essential. The music reached inside her and rearranged something fundamental. She'd never heard anything like it. Lysander stumbled in 10 minutes later, his trumpet case banging against his legs, his eyes unfocused. He'd been walking for what felt like hours, though it had only been 30 minutes. The city had become a maze, and he'd forgotten where he was trying to go. Penn Station, that seemed like something from another life. All that mattered was finding the source of the music he kept hearing. He saw Helena, first tall, blonde, illuminated by the colored lights like an angel or a hallucination. The drug in his system surged, and suddenly she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Not Hermia. How could he have ever thought it was Hermia? This woman, this vision in the strange lights, she was everything. "You," Lysander breathed, approaching Helena. "I've been looking for you everywhere." Helena turned, confused. "Lysander, what are you? Where's Hermia?" Hermia? The name sounded foreign to him now. "I don't care about Hermia. How could I, when you're standing here? Helena, you're incredible. How did I never see it before?" Helena's eyes narrowed with suspicion and pain. "This is Demetrius's doing, isn't it? He put you up to this. Some kind of joke. Mock the pathetic girl who can't take a hint. No, I swear. Stay away from me, Lysander." Helena pushed past him, heading deeper into the crowd, tears starting again. Even here, even in this strange place, she couldn't escape being the butt of someone's cruel humor. Lysander followed her, protesting, trying to explain feelings he didn't understand himself, leaving his trumpet case abandoned by the door. Hermia arrived next, her small frame nearly lost in the crowd of bohemians and night people. She looked round frantically for Lysander, but the warehouse was dim and packed with bodies moving to the music. The drug had taken hold of her differently. Everything seemed hilarious and tragic at once, overwhelming in its intensity. She found herself laughing and crying simultaneously, pushing through the crowd. She saw Helena first, with Lysander trailing after her, and relief flooded through her. "Lysander," she called out. "There you are." I thought I'd lost you." But when she reached him, Lysander barely glanced at her. "Hermia, I need to talk to you about something." "Yes, we need to go. We're going to miss the train. I don't love you anymore." The words came out flat, factual. "I'm sorry. I thought I did. But I was wrong. It's Helena I love. I think it's always been Helena." Hermia stared at him, certain she'd misheard over the music. "What did you say?" "I love Helena, not you. I'm sorry, but you need to know the truth." The world tilted sideways for Hermia. The drug in her system mixed with shock and betrayal, creating a cocktail of emotions so intense she couldn't breathe. "You're joking. This is some kind of I'm not joking. Look, you're a great girl, but Helena issues everything. I need to be with her." He turned away from Hermia and continued pursuing Helena through the crowd, leaving Hermia standing alone, her mouth open in disbelief, tears starting to stream down her face. Then Demetrius entered Avalon, and everything got worse. He'd been wandering the streets in a daze, the drug making reality feel negotiable, flexible. When he found the warehouse and stumbled inside, the first person he saw was Helenatal, radiant, heartbroken, and something in his chemically altered brain clicked into place like a key in a lock. This was the woman he loved. Not Hermia. How had he ever wasted time on Hermia? Helena was everything. Helena had always been everything. He'd been a fool, but he could see clearly now. "Helena!" Demetrius shouted across the warehouse. "Helena, wait." Helena turned, saw Demetrius, and her face crumpled. "Not you, too. What is this? What kind of sick game are you all playing?" She ran, pushing toward the exit, but both Lysander and Demetrius followed, both declaring their love, both insisting they were sincere. Helena was sobbing now, convinced this was the cruelest prank ever devised, that somehow they'd all conspired to torture her. And Hermia, watching this unfold, felt rage building inside her like a physical force. Hermia caught up to the trio near the stage, grabbing Helena's arm and spinning her around. "What did you do?" Hermia demanded, her voice shaking with fury. "How did you steal him from me?" Helena pulled her arm free, her face a mask of pain and anger. "Steal him, Hermia? I don't want your boyfriend. I don't want either of them. This is some kind of trick, and I don't know what you're all trying to prove, but it's not funny." "She didn't do anything," Lysander interjected, stepping between them. "I just woke up, that's all. I saw what was really in front of me." "So did I," Demetrius added, positioning himself on Helena's other side. "Helena, I was blind before. I wasted so much time chasing someone who didn't want me when you were there all along. Please, give me a chance to make it right. Both of you, get away from her." Hermia screamed, her small frame vibrating with rage. She turned on Helena. "You were supposed to be alone. You were supposed to be the pathetic one that nobody wanted. That was your role. And now you've somehow seduced both of them." Seduced? Helena's voice rose to a shriek. "You think I wanted this? You think I orchestrated some elaborate scheme to humiliate myself even further? Look at me, Hermia. I'm a mess. I've been crying in the street. I've been following Demetrius around like a stray dog, and now both of them are pretending to love me as some kind of performance art." The music had stopped. Titania's set had ended, and now the crowd was watching the four young musicians tear each other apart with the detached interest of people watching a car accident. Some were amused, some were sympathetic. Most were just high enough that it all seemed like part of the evening's entertainment. From his perch at the bar, Oberon watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. Puck appeared at his elbow, grinning. "Beautiful work, right, boss? Got them all twisted up like a pretzel." Oberon's eyes narrowed. Which one did you dose first? The guy? The trumpet player? Then the girl he was with? Then the other guy? Then the tall blonde? Describe the trumpet player. Skinny, intense looking, fedora, that's Lysander. And you gave him the drops first? Yeah, why? Oberon closed his eyes, understanding the mistake. And the first person he saw after drinking was, I don't know, boss. It was dark. I sent him down a path, and Puck's grin faded. Oh no. You dosed him before he found Hermia again. He saw Helena first. And then you dosed Demetrius, who also saw Helena first. Oberon's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. You were supposed to fix Demetrius's affections on Helena and leave Lysander alone. Instead, you've got both men chasing the same woman, and Hermia thinking she's been abandoned. I can fix it, Puck said quickly. Just give me more of the serum. You'll do nothing else tonight. You've caused enough chaos. But even as Oberon said it, he couldn't suppress a slight smile. The chaos was, in its own way, instructive. These uptown musicians, with their conventional romances and business arrangements, were learning what it felt like when love became irrational, when desire refused to follow logical patterns. Across the warehouse, Hermia had launched herself at Helena, her small fists flailing. You always wanted what I had, even when we were kids. You couldn't stand that I was talented and pretty. Helena caught Hermia's wrists, holding her at bay with her longer reach. You're calling yourself pretty. You're a child. You're a tiny, spoiled child who's never been told no in her entire life. At least men actually want me. At least I don't have to beg for scraps of attention. Lysander and Demetrius both tried to intervene, both shouting, both declaring that they only wanted Helena, that Hermia should leave her alone. This only enraged Hermia further. She broke free from Helena's grip and went for Lysander instead, pounding on his chest. How can you do this to me? We were going to run away together. We were going to start a new life. That was before I understood my real feelings, Lysander said, maddeningly calm in his drugged state. Hermia, you deserve someone who truly loves you. That person isn't me. We're engaged. My father arranged. I never loved you, Demetrius interrupted. That was your father's arrangement, not mine. And now I see that I've been given a gift. The gift of clarity. Helena is the one. Helena had backed away from all of them, shaking her head in disbelief. This is insane. This is actually insane. I'm leaving. I'm going back uptown. And I'm going to pretend this entire night never happened. But when she tried to leave, both Lysander and Demetrius followed, and Hermia followed them, and the whole tangled mess spilled out into the street as dawn began to break over the city, turning the sky from black to deep blue to pale grey. Oberon watched them go, then turned to find Titania standing beside him. She'd changed out of her stage clothes into a simple dress, her head wrap removed so her natural hair fell in soft curls around her face. Your little experiment is going well, she said dryly. It's teaching them something. It's torture. Sometimes those are the same thing. Oberon looked at his wife, seeing the distance between them even though they stood inches apart. We need to talk about Charlie. There's nothing to talk about. He's talented, and I'm helping him develop that talent properly. You're trying to turn him into something he's not. You're trying to make him respectable, commercial. You want him to play for the same people who would let him in their clubs through the front door. Titania's eyes flashed dangerously. Don't you dare lecture me about respectability. You, who dropped out of the mainstream, who threw away every opportunity, who could have been playing with the greats, but instead chose to hide down here in this warehouse, playing for 50 people at a time. I chose freedom, Oberon shot back. I chose art over commerce, something you used to understand before you started thinking about legacy and posterity and all that other garbage that kills real music. Legacy matters, posterity matters. Or do you want Charlie to end up like Ubroke, bitter, playing the same warehouse for the same crowd until he's too old to hold his horn? The argument was drawing attention from the remaining crowd. Charlie himself had retreated to the piano, his hands frozen over the keys, caught between his two mentors who were tearing each other apart over his future. Before either Oberon or Titania could continue, the door burst open and the mechanicals stumbled in, looking exhausted and frantic. Peter Quince led the group, still clutching his sheaf of papers, his bow tie askew. Nick Bottom followed, his pomaded hair now disheveled, his shirt stained with sweat. "Is this Avalon?" Quince asked breathlessly. "We were told this was the place we need somewhere to rehearse. The Athens Club kicked us out. Said we were too loud, disturbing the neighbors at 4 a.m. Oberon turned from his argument with Titania, momentarily distracted. "Your musicians?" Doo-wop Bottoman announced proudly, straightening his posture. "The Mechanicals. Perhaps you've heard of us." "Can't say I have." "Well, you will soon. We're performing at Theodore Athens's wedding reception in 3 days. Just need a place to practice. We'll pay, of course. Whatever your rate is." Something flickered across Oberon's face, amusement mixed with opportunity. "Theodore Athens's wedding? That's interesting. Tell you what, you can use the space for free. But I want to hear you first. Go ahead, give us a number." The mechanicals looked at each other nervously, then Quince nodded. They arranged themselves in formation, Bottom front and center, flute and starveling flanking him, Snout with his bass, Snug positioning himself behind a borrowed drum kit at the edge of the stage. They launched into Earth Angel, the classic doo-wop ballad, their voices blending in the familiar harmonies. It was technically proficient, the kind of music that played on every radio station in America, that teenagers slow danced to at sock hops and school proms. It was safe, commercial, utterly conventional, and in the context of Avalon, surrounded by musicians who were trying to dismantle and rebuild the entire concept of music, it sounded absolutely absurd. The remaining crowd began to laugh, not cruelly, but with genuine confusion that anyone would perform such square, manufactured music. Bottom, mistaking the laughter for appreciation, began to embellish, adding more Elvis-style hit movements, pointing at imaginary audience members, really selling the performance. This made people laugh harder. Oberon held up his hand, stopping them mid-verse. "That's enough," Bottom beamed. "Good, right? We've got 6 more numbers, just like it. We're thinking of opening with Shboom and closing with It's Terrible," Titania interrupted flatly. "It's soulless, mechanical, no offense to your group name, and completely derivative. You sound like every other doo-wop group in this city. Which means you sound like you retrying to sound like someone else who was trying to sound like someone else." Bottom's face fell. "But we've been working on this material for months. We've got choreography, we've got matching jackets. You've got nothing," Oberon said, but his voice was gentler than Titania's. "You've got technical skill, but no voice, no individuality. You're performing music instead of living it." Quince stepped forward, his pride wounded. "With all due respect, sir, we didn't come here for a critique. We came here to rehearse for a paying gig. If you're going to let us use the space, fine. If not, we'll find somewhere else." Oberon studied them for a long moment, then smiled slowly. "I'll make you a deal. You can use the space, but you have to work with someone who can teach you what real music sounds like. We have a very specific sound we're trying to achieve," Bottom began. Your specific sound is boring, Oberon said bluntly. But there's something underneath it. Raw material. You, he pointed at Flute. The nervous kid in the back. Come here. Flute approached hesitantly, his eyes wide behind his glasses. Sing something for me. Not the doo-wop stuff. Just sing. First thing that comes into your head. Flute opened his mouth, and what came out was extraordinary pure. High voice with an aching quality, nothing like the practiced harmonies of the group. He sang a few lines from Strange Fruit, the Billie Holiday song about lynching in the South, and the warehouse went completely silent. When he finished, Oberon nodded slowly. That's real. That's something. He turned to the rest of the group. You've been wasting him, hiding him in the background because he doesn't fit your image. Bottoms sputtered. He's got a falsetto. It's not right for lead vocals in doo-wop. Then maybe you shouldn't be doing doo-wop. Oberon gestured to Charlie at the piano. Kid, play something for them. Show them what music sounds like when it's not trying to please anyone. Charlie's hands moved over the keys, and suddenly the warehouse, filled with sound that was like nothing the mechanicals had ever heard. Dissonant, complex, beautiful, and ugly at the same time music that didn't resolve the way they expected, that kept them off balance and engaged. Dawn broke over New York City like a cymbal crash, sudden and bright. The four lovers had wandered the streets for hours, their arguments cycling through rage and confusion and exhaustion. They'd ended up in a small park near the Hudson River, where the first light caught the water and turned it silver, where the early morning traffic was just beginning its rumble. Helena sat on a bench, her head in her hands. Lysander sat on one side of her, Demetrius on the other, both maintaining their declarations of love even as their voices grew hoarse. Hermia stood a few feet away, swaying with exhaustion, her makeup completely ruined, her carefully packed suitcase abandoned somewhere blocks behind them. Please, Helena said for the 100th time, please just stop, both of you. I can't take any more. But the drug was beginning to wear off, slowly, the way a fog lifts in stages. Lysander blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked around as if seeing his surroundings for the first time. The park, the river, Helena beside him, and across from them, Hermia, looking destroyed. Hermia, he said, confusion thick in his voice. What? Why are you crying? Why am I crying? Hermia's voice cracked. You tell me you don't love me, that you never loved me, that you love Helena instead, and you're asking why I'm crying. Lysander stood abruptly, his head spinning. Memories of the night came back in fragments, drinking from a flask, the strange man in the park, following Helena, saying things he didn't mean, or had he meant them. Everything felt jumbled, uncertain. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I was out of my mind. Something happened. Someone gave me something. He turned to Helena. I'm sorry. I don't know what I said to you, but you said you loved me, Helena said flatly, the pain in her voice unmistakable. You followed me around, declaring your eternal devotion. Both of you. She glanced at Demetrius, who was also beginning to shake off the effects of the drug, his face confused. Demetrius stood, running his hands through his hair. Unlike Lysander, his memories were clearer and more disturbing. He remembered drinking from the flask, remembered entering Avalon, remembered seeing Helena and feeling like he'd been struck by lightning, like every circuit in his brain had rewired itself. But underneath that artificial clarity, he could feel his old obsession with Hermia trying to reassert itself. Like a default setting his system wanted to return to, except something was different now. Looking at Hermia in the morning light, exhausted and heartbroken, he felt nothing. The compulsion that had driven him for months was simply gone. And looking at Helena Even as the drug faded, he felt something genuine. Not the overwhelming, artificial passion of the night before, but something quieter, more real, recognition. He'd loved her once, years ago, before ambition and social climbing had made him fixate on Hermia as a better match. The drug had uncreated feelings from nothing. It had stripped away his pretensions and shown him what had been there all along. "Helena," Demetrius said slowly, carefully, "I don't know what happened last night. I think someone drugged us, all of us, but I need you to know what I'm feeling now, that's real. I was wrong. I was chasing Hermia because of what she represented, not because I loved her, and I hurt you in the process. If you'll let me, I'd like to make that right." Helena looked at him with red-rimmed eyes, searching his face for mockery or deception. "How can I trust anything anyone says after tonight?" "You can't," Demetrius admitted. "Not right now. But give me time. Let me prove it." Hermia turned to Lysander, her voice small and broken. "And you? Was it the drug talking, or were you telling the truth? That you don't love me?" Lysander crossed to her, taking her hands. "I love you. I've always loved you. Last night was, I don't know what it was, a nightmare, someone's sick joke. But I'm here now, and I'm clear, and I'm telling you, you're the one I want." Hermia searched his face the way Helena had searched Demetrius's, looking for certainty in an uncertain world. Finally, she nodded, too exhausted to do anything else. "We missed the train. We'll catch the next one, or the one after that. We'll figure it out." A taxi cruised by, and Demetrius flagged it down. "Come on," he said to the group. "Let's get out of here. Let's go somewhere normal. Get some breakfast. Try to make sense of this." They piled into the cab. The four of them squeezed together, smelling of sweat and smoke and the strange night they'd survived. As the taxi pulled away from the waterfront, heading back towards civilization, each of them felt the night receding like a fever dream. Something that had happened but couldn't quite be believed. Back at Avalon, the scene was very different. The mechanicals had been working with Charlie for 3 hours straight, and something remarkable was happening. Nick Bottom, stripped of his ego by exhaustion and Oberon's relentless criticism, had stopped trying to be Elvis and started finding his own voice. It was rougher than his polished doo-wop croon, but more honest. Francis' flute had been moved to lead vocals onto numbers, his haunting falsetto transforming the group's sound entirely. Quince had stopped trying to control every note and started listening to what the other musicians were doing, building arrangements that breathed and evolved. Even Snug, the nervous drummer, had loosened up, finding a more complex rhythm than the simple boom-chick of standard doo-wop. Oberon listened from the shadows as the mechanicals ran through their new arrangement of At Last, the Etta James number. What had been a straightforward vocal showcase was now something stranger and more interesting. Flute's voice soaring over syncopated rhythms, Bottom providing a gravelly counterpoint. The whole thing infused with an edge that hadn't existed before. When they finished, the handful of musicians still lingering at Avalon actually applauded. Real applause, not the ironic laughter from earlier. "That's it," Oberon said, stepping forward. "That's what I wanted to hear. You've still got work to do, but now you've got something worth working on. You've got a voice." Bottom, remarkably, looked humbled. "I've been doing this wrong for years, haven't I?" "You've been doing what you thought you were supposed to do," Oberon corrected. "There's a difference. Now you're doing what you actually want to do." Peter Quince sat heavily on the edge of the stage, his sheet music scattered around him. Half of it was now useless. They'd abandoned his careful arrangements for something more improvised, more alive. Theodore Athens is expecting doo-wop, classic, safe, wedding, appropriate music. If we show up with this, Then you'll either change his mind or you won't get paid, Oberon said bluntly. But you'll be playing music that matters. That's worth more than Theodore Athens's approval. Robin Starveling lit a cigarette, his hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline. I don't know if I can go back to playing the old way. Not after tonight. Then don't, Oberon said simply. That's always been your choice. All of you, across the warehouse. Titania had been working with Charlie on a completely different approach, structured, classical-influenced arrangements that showcased his technical brilliance. The contrast between the two teaching styles was stark, and Charlie sat at the piano bench looking torn in half. I don't know which way to go, Charlie admitted quietly to no one in particular. They're both right, they're both wrong. I just want to play. Puck, who'd been sitting on an amplifier watching the whole circus, jumped down and approached Oberon. Boss, about last night. The lovers, I really did mess that up. You did. You want me to follow them? Make sure they're okay? Oberon shook his head. Let them figure it out themselves. They've learned what they needed to learn, that love isn't rational, that desire doesn't follow rules, that sometimes the heart wants what it wants for no good reason at all. He paused. Besides, you've caused enough chaos for one night. What about you and Titania? Puck asked, lowering his voice. You two still fighting over the kid? Oberon looked across the warehouse at his wife, saw the exhaustion in her posture, the way she held herself separate from everyone else. That's complicated. Everything's complicated with you two. Before Oberon could respond, the warehouse door opened and Theodore Athens walked in. He looked out of place in his expensive suit, his polished shoes, his air of controlled authority. The remaining night people, scattered throughout Avalon, turned to stare at this intruder from the legitimate world. Theodore scanned the room until he found what he was looking for: the mechanicals, clustered around the stage, looking guilty like children caught somewhere they shouldn't be. Quince, Theodore said, his voice carrying across the warehouse. I've been looking for you. We had a deal: you use my stage for rehearsal. You lock up when you're done. Instead, I find the place wide open, lights on, and you're gone. Quince stood, apologetic. Mr. Athens, I'm sorry. We were asked to leave, and we needed somewhere to practice, and you came here. Theodore's eyes moved to Oberon. Oberon, it's been a long time. Theodore, Oberon's voice was neutral. 5 years. 6, 7. Not since you turned down my offer to headline at the Athens. There was no hostility in Theodore's voice, just statement of fact. I don't play for tourists. You don't play for anyone except the same 50 people who already worship you. That's not art, Oberon. That's hiding. The warehouse went very quiet. Everyone understood they were witnessing something significant to kings of 2 different kingdoms, facing each other across an unbridgeable divide. I heard Hippolyta's at your club now, Oberon said. She was too good for you 7 years ago. She's still too good for you. She chose me, Theodore said simply. And in 3 days, I'm marrying her. Which brings me to why I'm here. He turned back to the mechanicals. I need to hear what you've prepared. I need to know I am not making a mistake hiring you for the most important day of my life. The mechanicals exchanged nervous glances. This was the moment of truth. They could play it safe, revert to their old arrangements, give Theodore Athens exactly what he expected. Or they could perform what they'd just learned, risk everything, and possibly lose the biggest opportunity they'd ever had. Bottom stepped forward. Mr. Athens, we've been working on something new. It's not what you're expecting, but it's good. It's real. Theodore checked his watch. You've got 10 minutes. Show me what you've got. The mechanicals took their positions. Charlie, without being asked, moved to the piano to accompany them. And as they launched into their reimagined arrangement, Theodore Athens's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something that might have been grudging respect. When the mechanicals finished their number, the silence in Avalon stretched taut as a drumhead. Theodore Athens stood motionless, his expression unreadable. Bottom wiped sweat from his forehead. Flute looked like he might faint. Quince clutched his abandoned sheet music like a security blanket. Finally, Theodore spoke. "That wasn't what I asked for." "No, sir," Quince admitted. "It wasn't. It was better." Theodore's face broke into a genuine smile, the first real one he'd shown all night. It was actually interesting. Had personality. Had soul. "How long have you been holding out on me, Quince?" "We just found it tonight, sir. We've been playing it safe for years, and safe is death in this business," Theodore interrupted. "Safe is what every other group does. This," he gestured at the stage, "this is something I'd actually want at my wedding. Something Hippolyta would appreciate." He paused. "She's got good taste, my bride. Better than mine, if I'm honest. She'd never forgive me if I served up vanilla doo-wop when I could have given her something with real flavor." The mechanicals sagged with relief. Bottom actually whooped, then tried to contain himself. Starveling and Snout exchanged grins. Even serious Peter Quince allowed himself a small smile. Theodore turned to Oberon. "I suppose I have you to thank for this." "Don't thank me. They did the work. I just showed them it was possible. You always were good at that. Showing people what's possible." Theodore's voice carried no sarcasm, just acknowledgement. "You could have had everything, you know. Money, fame, your name on records. Instead, you chose this warehouse and a congregation of maybe 100 people who know your name." "I chose freedom," Oberon said. "You chose success. Neither of us got it wrong, we just wanted different things." Theodore nodded slowly, accepting this. Then his eyes found Titania, who'd been watching from across the warehouse. "Tina, you look well." "Theodore." She moved closer, her movements still graceful despite the long night. "Congratulations on the wedding. Hippolyta's lucky. I'm the lucky one." Theodore hesitated, then continued, "I heard you and Oberon are having troubles. The whole scene's talking about it. We're working through some differences," Titania said carefully. "Differences about that kid." Theodore glanced at Charlie, still sitting at the piano. "The prodigy you're both fighting over." "We're not fighting over him," Oberon said sharply. "We're fighting about what he should become. What kind of musician? What kind of life?" Theodore studied Charlie for a moment, then addressed the young man directly. "What do you want, kid?" Charlie looked up, startled to be included in the conversation. I don't know, sir. I want to play. I want to be good. I want to matter." "That's not an answer. That's 3 different things that might contradict each other." Theodore walked over to the piano, leaned against it. "Here's what I learned building the Athens. You can chase purity or you can chase success. You can play for yourself or play for an audience. You can be uncompromising or you can eat regularly. Most people have to choose. Some of us refuse to choose," Oberon said. "Some of us find a way to do both, by living in a warehouse and scraping by." Theodore shot back. "That's not romantic, Oberon. That's just stubborn, and selling out to play what tourists want to hear. That's not success. That's surrender." The argument might have escalated, but Titania stepped between them. "Enough, both of you." She looked at Theodore. "You made your choice. Oberon made his. Both are valid. Both cost something." Then she turned to Oberon. "And we're making Charlie choose between us when maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe he can learn from both of us." Maybe that's actually the answer. Oberon opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The wisdom in her words cut through his pride. Maybe you're right. I usually am, Titania said, allowing herself a small smile. Theodore checked his watch again. It's almost 6. I need to get back to the club. Start preparing for tonight's set. Quince, bring your group by the Athens tomorrow night. We'll do a full run-through on the actual stage. Make sure the sound works, the timing's right. The wedding's in 2 days. We need to be perfect. We will be, Mr. Athens. Thank you. Thank you so much. As Theodore headed for the door, he paused next to Oberon. You should come to the wedding, both of you. He glanced at Titania. I know we run in different circles now, but we came up together. That means something. I don't do weddings, Oberon said. Make an exception. Besides, I think you'll enjoy it. I'm letting the mechanicals do their thing, which means it won't be the boring society affair everyone's expecting. Might even be some real music. Theodore's smile was genuine. Think about it. When Theodore left, the warehouse seemed to exhale. The night was officially over. The musicians began to pack up, drift toward the exits, head home to sleep through the day. The mechanicals gathered their instruments and their newfound confidence, thanking Oberon and Charlie profusely. Only Oberon and Titania remained, standing in the early morning light, filtering through the grimy windows. Truce, Oberon offered. Truce, Titania agreed. We've been tearing each other apart over how to help Charlie when we should have been working together. I'm sorry, Oberon said quietly, for being stubborn, for making this about winning instead of about what's right. Titania moved closer, and for the first time in months, the distance between them felt bridgeable. I'm sorry too, for trying to control everything, for forgetting why we started doing this in the first place. Outside, the city was waking up, trucks making deliveries, early commuters heading to work, the ordinary world beginning its ordinary day, completely unaware of the magic and chaos that had unfolded through the night in the hidden spaces between respectability and madness. The 3rd of July, 1957. The day of Theodore Athens's wedding dawned hot and bright. The kind of summer day when the city's concrete and steel absorbed the heat and threw it back twice as strong. By noon, the sidewalks shimmered, fire hydrants were opened for children to play in the spray, and anyone with sense stayed indoors beneath ceiling fans that pushed the thick air in lazy circles. The Athens Club had been transformed. White flowers, gardenias, and roses adorned every table, their perfume cutting through the usual smell of cigarettes and bourbon. White silk draped from the rafters. The stage had been expanded, decorated with more flowers, with candles in tall brass holders, with an arch of woven vines under which Theodore and Hippolyta would exchange their vows. By 4 o'clock, the guests began to arrive. They were an interesting mix: Theodore's business associates in their expensive suits, musicians from every club in the city, society people who never set foot in Greenwich Village before but wouldn't miss this wedding for anything, and a smattering of family members who looked overwhelmed by the glamour and noise. Hermia arrived with her father, Aegeus, who wore his best suit and a scowl. He hadn't spoken to his daughter in 2 days, not since she'd come home at dawn after her wild night, her makeup ruined, her carefully packed suitcase lost somewhere in the city. But tonight was Theodore Athens's wedding, and appearances had to be maintained. Lysander entered separately, as they'd agreed, taking a seat toward the back. He and Hermia exchanged glances across the crowded room, a whole conversation conducted in a single look. They hadn't run away. They'd come home, faced the consequences, and were now trying to figure out a path forward that didn't involve fleeing in the night. It was harder than running would have been, but somehow more real. Demetrius arrived with Helena, and this caused a stir. The tall blonde vocalist and the ambitious saxophonist made a striking couple, and everyone who knew their history, which was everyone, had opinions. Hadn't Demetrius been chasing Aegeus's daughter just days ago? Hadn't Helena been pining for him for months? What had changed? They didn't owe anyone explanations. They took their seats together, Helena's hand in Demetrius's, both of them looking more settled than they had in months. Whatever had happened that strange night, and neither of them fully understood, it had reset something fundamental. Demetrius had stopped chasing what he thought he should want and started appreciating what he actually had. Helena had stopped debasing herself for scraps of affection and started accepting genuine devotion. At a table near the stage, the mechanicals sat in their matching jackets, dark blue with silver trim, bottoms idea, and actually quite sharp. They were nervous, reviewing their set list, worrying about the sound check they'd done that afternoon. This was their moment. Everything depended on the next hour. "Remember," Quint said quietly, "we play what we rehearsed. The new arrangements. No matter how the crowd reacts." "What if they hate it?" Snug asked, his drumsticks already in his hands, though they wouldn't play for another hour. "Then they hate it," Bottom said, surprisingly philosophical. "But at least they'll hate something real. Something that's actually us." Flute adjusted his collar, his hands shaking slightly. He'd never sung lead in front of this many people before. What if his voice cracked? What if he forgot the words? Starveling put a hand on the young man's shoulder. "You've got this, Francis. We've all got this." At 5:30, Oberon and Titania entered together, and this caused an even bigger stir than Helena and Demetrius. The underground king and queen, the ones who'd rejected the mainstream, walking into Theodore Athens's wedding like they belonged there. They wore their outsider status proudly, Oberon in a black suit with a shirt of deep purple, Titania in a dress of gold silk that looked like liquid sunlight. Theodore, greeting guests near the entrance, saw them and smiled. "You came, we came," Oberon confirmed. "Wanted to see if you remembered how to throw a real party. Stick around, I think you'll be surprised." Theodore's eyes moved to Titania. "You look beautiful, Tina. You look happy, Theo. That's rarer than beautiful." At precisely 6 o'clock, the house lights dimmed. A piano began to play not the usual wedding march, but something jazzier, more sophisticated. Hippolyta, James, appeared at the back of the room, and every head turned. She wore white, but nothing traditional, a sleek gown that hugged her curves, with a high slit that showed her leg when she walked, with crystals sewn into the fabric that caught the light like stars. Her hair was crowned with white flowers. She carried no bouquet, both hands were free, swinging naturally at her sides as she walked down the aisle with the confidence of a woman who de-headlined 1,000 shows and knew exactly how to command a room. Theodore met her at the stage, taking her hands, his face showing an emotion that was rare for him, pure, unguarded joy. The ceremony was brief, officiated by a judge who was a regular at the club and understood that musicians didn't have patience for long speeches. Theodore and Hippolyta exchanged vows they'd written themselves, simple promises about partnership, about respecting each other's art, about building something together that was bigger than either of them alone. When the judge pronounced them married, Hippolyta pulled Theodore into a kiss that was passionate enough to make some of the society guests blush and the musicians cheer. The room erupted in applause, and the house band, a quartet Theodore had hired from Harlem, launched into a swinging number that got people on their feet immediately. The reception unfolded with the organized chaos of the best jazz clubs. Food appeared on tables: fried chicken and collard greens, alongside fancy French hors d'oeuvres, soul food and haute cuisine, sitting side by side because that's what Theodore and Hippolyta wanted, a marriage of traditions. Champagne flowed. The dance floor filled with couples moving to rhythms that ranged from traditional swing to more experimental bebop. Hermia found Lysander on the edge of the dance floor. "Dance with me?" she asked. He took her hand without hesitation, pulling her into the crowd of swaying bodies. They moved together with the ease of people who'd spent hours practicing, who understood each other's rhythms. "My father's been talking to some people," Hermia said quietly, her mouth close to Lysander's ear so he could hear over the music. "Trying to line up opportunities for me. Solo work. Things that would keep me away from you. Will you take them?" "Not a chance." She pulled back to look at his face. "I meant what I said. We're in this together. Your father will make things difficult. Let him. I'm done living my life according to his arrangements." She smiled, and in that moment, she looked absolutely free. "Besides, I heard the Catskills resort scene is hiring for the summer season. We could still go. Just not by running away, by choosing." At another table, Demetrius and Helena watched the dancers. Helena had kicked off her heels under the table, her feet aching but her heart lighter than it had been in months. "I keep waiting for you to change your mind," Helena admitted. "To wake up and realize you made a mistake." "I made a lot of mistakes," Demetrius said. "Letting you go was one of them. But being here with you now, this isn't a mistake. This is the first thing I've gotten right in a long time." Helena wanted to believe him. And maybe that was progress, the wanting, even if the believing would take time. As the evening deepened, Theodore took the stage, tapping the microphone to get attention. The crowd quieted, turning toward him. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Theodore began, his voice carrying the authority that made him a successful club owner. "Hippolyta and I wanted this to be more than just a wedding. We wanted it to be a celebration of what we believe in: music, community. The idea that art can bring people together across all the lines that usually divide us." The crowd applauded, and Theodore continued. "So we've asked a group to perform tonight that represents something special. They're not famous, they're not on the radio, but they've got something real, something honest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Mechanicals." The Mechanicals took the stage with their instruments, looking terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The crowd's applause was polite, but reserved. Nobody knew what to expect from an unknown doo-wop group. Peter Quince counted them in, and they launched into their opening number, their reimagined version of "Only You," which had been a standard Platters song. But what the Mechanicals did with it was anything but standard. Flute's voice soared over complex harmonies. Bottom's gravelly counterpoint, adding texture. Charlie's piano work weaving through it all with unexpected jazz chords that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. The crowd's polite attention shifted to genuine interest. People stopped talking. Dancers stopped moving to listen. Even the bartenders paused mid-pour. When the first song ended, the applause was real, enthusiastic. Emboldened, the Mechanicals moved into their second number, then their third. They were finding their groove, feeding off the crowd's energy, becoming something more than the sum of their parts. Oberon leaned toward Titania at their table. "They're good. They're better than good. They're brave." Titania watched the stage with professional appreciation. They were doing something genuine in front of people who could destroy them with one bad review. "That's what art is," Oberon said. "Bravery disguised as performance." On stage, Botten had completely shed his Elvis impression, his ego, all the artifice that had held him back. He was just singing, just feeling the music, letting it move through him. Flute had found confidence in his falsetto, using it not as a gimmick, but as an instrument of genuine emotion. Even Snug's drumming had loosened up, his anxiety replaced by the simple joy of keeping time for something beautiful. The mechanicals played their full set 25 minutes that felt both eternal and instantaneous. And when they finished, the crowd at the Athens Club rose to its feet in genuine ovation. After the mechanicals finished their set, Hippolyta herself took the stage. This was what everyone had been waiting for: the bride's performance. The moment when the best vocalist in the city would show why Theodore Athens had pursued her so relentlessly. She sang at last, but made it entirely her own, her voice wrapping around the melody with such intimacy that every person in the room felt like she was singing directly to them. She sang about waiting, about finally finding the right person, about love that was worth the journey. Theodore watched from the edge of the stage with an expression of such naked adoration that even the cynics in the crowd felt moved. When she finished, she held out her hand to Theodore. "Dance with your wife, Mr. Athens." He joined her on the stage-turned dance floor, and they moved together as the band played something slow and sweet. Other couples joined them: Hermia and Lysander, Helena and Demetrius, Oberon and Titania, dozens of others, until the floor was full of people holding each other, swaying to the music, participating in something larger than themselves. As the night wore on and the champagne continued to flow, Aegeus found himself at the bar next to Lysander. The older man looked at the younger one, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time, not as an impediment to his plans, but as a person who genuinely loved his daughter. "You make her happy," Aegeus said finally, the words coming out grudgingly but sincerely. "I try to, sir. That's more than I can say for the man I chose for her." Aegeus took a long drink. "Demetrius is a fine musician, but he never looked at Hermia the way you do. The way he looks at the best girl now. Does this mean? It means I'm tired of fighting a battle I've already lost." Aegeus sighed. "You have my blessing. Not that you were waiting for it, but you have it anyway. Take care of my daughter. And if you hurt her, I know people who know people." Lysander couldn't help but smile. "Understood, sir." Near midnight, as the party began to wind down, the four lovers found themselves together at a table in the corner. They'd avoided each other most of the night, the memory of their strange odyssey still too fresh, too confusing. "Does anyone actually remember what happened?" Hermia asked, finally. "I mean really remember, not just fragments." "Someone drugged us," Demetrius said. "That much I know. That little guy, Puck." Lysander shook his head. "I remember him giving me something to drink. After that, everything gets hazy." "I remember being at that warehouse," Helena said. "Avalon. The music there was like nothing I'd ever heard. And you too." She looked at Lysander and Demetrius, were both insisting you loved me. "I thought it was the cruelest joke." "It wasn't a joke," Demetrius said quietly. "The drug, whatever it was, showed me something I'd been too blind to see. That I'd been chasing the wrong person for the wrong reasons." Hermia didn't look offended. If anything, she looked relieved. "My father wanted me to marry you because it made sense on paper. But nothing about love makes sense on paper." "Amen to that." Lysander raised his glass. They toasted together to confusion, to clarity, to strange nights that changed everything, to finding the right person even when you were looking in the wrong direction. Across the room, Oberon and Titania prepared to leave. Charlie was with them, the young prodigy who'd been the source of their conflict, now the bridge to their reconciliation. They'd decided together, both of them working with Charlie, teaching him structure and freedom, discipline and improvisation, showing him that music didn't have to choose between art and accessibility. "Tonight was good," Titania said to Theodore as they said their goodbyes. "You did something real here." brought different worlds together. That was the idea, Theodore replied. The downtown scene, the uptown clubs were all playing the same music, just in different dialects. Maybe it's time we started listening to each other. Oberon shook Theodore's hand, a gesture that felt like more than courtesy, like a détente between kingdoms, an acknowledgement that there was room in this city for both of them. As the last guests trickled out into the summer night, Theodore and Hippolyta stood alone in the club that was now truly theirs together. White flowers wilted slightly in the heat. Empty champagne glasses caught the remaining light. The stage stood empty, but somehow still resonant with all the music that had been played on it. Was it everything you hoped? Hippolyta asked. It was better, Theodore said, pulling her close. It was real. Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm. Somewhere, a saxophone played a late-night melody. Somewhere, young lovers made promises they'd struggle to keep. Somewhere, musicians found their voices and lost them and found them again. The summer of 1957 moved toward its midpoint, toward autumn, toward whatever came next. But tonight had been magic. The kind that happened when music and love and chaos and intention all collided in exactly the right way. The kind that people would talk about for years, remembering the night when Theodore Athens married Hippolyta James, when a doo-wop group became something more, when for confused lovers found clarity, when the underground and the mainstream met under one roof and discovered they were so different after all. The kind of magic that only happens in New York City in the summer, when the night is warm and anything feels possible and music is the only truth that matters. The kind worth believing in.